Today we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome. People maybe compliment you or say, "You're amazing. You're doing great. Look how talented you are. You are such an amazing businesswoman." And yet you feel on the inside like, "Oh my gosh, no, I'm not."
Welcome to the podcast with Kilee Nichols. I'm Kilee, founder and CEO of the life-changing accessories brand Nickel & Suede and the successful style blog One Little Mama. I made the unlikely transition from stay-at-home mom to founder and entrepreneur. It takes a lot of courage to make a change like that, but I love the growth and the confidence that's come from stepping out of my comfort zone. This is the podcast for people who want to be inspired to be brave, to take a chance, and to change their life. I'll be sharing stories and actionable takeaways about working with your spouse, being a working mom, starting and growing a business, confidence, motivation, and more. So get ready to get inspired and to get started with Kilee Nichols.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. I'm Kilee and you are back with Kilee Nichols. Today on the podcast, we are going to be talking about another thing that I have strong feelings about. I feel like 2019 has been a really big stretch year, growth year for me. And the other day I was interviewed on stage, and I might have shared this already, but someone afterwards complimented me and said, "Thanks for sharing, so openly." And I said, "I don't know very much, but I definitely know how to share openly and authentically. So, all I can do is just be me." So this is something I've been struggling with. And I think a lot of people struggle with this, especially entrepreneurs, especially people who are trying new things. And so today we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome. So if you don't know what the imposter syndrome is, or if you haven't put a name to it, you might say, "That's me too." So what is imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome, it is, can be defined as a collection of feelings of inadequacy, maybe like despite evidence of success. So really it's feeling inadequate even though you look successful on the outside. So you've had success, you're doing well. People maybe compliment you or say, "You're amazing. You're doing great. Look how talented you are. You are such an amazing businesswoman." And yet you feel on the inside like, "Oh my gosh, no, I'm not. Like, I am such a fraud. Someone's going to find me out. And please don't check my email. Don't look in my Excel spreadsheets. Don't open my laptop and see how I don't know anything." And so it's that feeling of people think I'm one thing and they're going to find out that I am totally not that thing. And it's that like that sounds really scary, right? And so maybe you have felt that way. And so that is the imposter syndrome. It's that you are afraid people are going to find out that you're a fraud or you're an imposter. And so, I was looking up a couple things to say okay, where does that come from? A lot of people struggle with it, supposedly more women than men. But I was talking to Derek, my producer, before this, and you were saying you struggle with this to some degree too, right?
Definitely. So in the video world, I'll post a video and it does get, good reviews. People say they love it.
Because you're great.
Oh, thank you. But I really what's your angle? What are you really trying to get at? Sometimes I don't believe them.
Yeah.
And maybe it's good to have a little bit of this because it keeps you humble, but some of it could be bad for self-esteem. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it's it's kind of maybe a fine line of a little bit of self-doubt, which could be good, feeling humble, you don't want to get your head too full of yourself, but also just...
I had no clue there was a name for this before you said this.
It can be crippling.
Yeah.
It can be really crippling. I go to events. I've been going to more events this year than ever because Nickel & Suede has, by getting on the Inc. list for the last couple of years and getting a little bit more press, and by growing, we have more visibility, and so we get invited to things, and as the face of the company, then I go. And as the face of the company, sometimes I get more of the attention or more of the blame for the success, or more of the what would you call it? The credit. Yeah. There you go. The credit for the success. And but I don't I'm not the reason for all of the success. Like we have a great team, we have Soren, we have like all these other people that have gone into the success of the business, but as the face of it, lots of times I get the attention for the success. And so I struggle when people say things like, they will interview me or introduce me and they'll say, this is Kilee Nichols. She's this amazing businesswoman. And so then like part of me is just dying inside like, no, I'm not. Like, I am not this amazing businesswoman. I didn't go to business school. I don't understand a lot of business terms. I don't do the accounting. I don't know how most of our production facility works because I didn't organize any of the processes that make our factory flow. And that's okay. Like I'm totally okay with that. I am so thankful that Soren and Ryan, our production manager, are geniuses and they have set all these things up. But and I definitely like try to give them credit all of the time. But just the idea that sometimes it feels like I get credit for a lot of things, and that maybe people think that I know a lot more than I know, is wrapped up into that. She's this amazing businesswoman. Makes me feel like an imposter. Does that make sense? So what do you do with that feeling of I don't belong at the top of this company? I didn't even mean to be here. Like I started a business in my basement, and I definitely know how to pick out colors. This is what I tell Soren sometimes, like, my only job here should be to pick the colors of the leathers. That's all I know how to do. And if that's all my title was color picker, then I would totally feel like qualified. But I do not feel qualified when my title says CEO and founder. That feels really loaded. So anyways, things I grapple with right now. And so Derek and I were talking, what do we do to deal with these feelings of imposter syndrome? How do you conquer this? And he said, I'm still in the thick of it. And I said, like, me too.
I thought it was, fake it till you make it.
Yeah. Yeah. Fake it till you make it is one of the pieces of advice out there, because I was looking for advice on imposter syndrome. How do you deal with this? Fake it till you make it is one recommended piece of advice, because I do think sometimes you just have to, a lot of things that I recommend and talk about is mindset. Like, okay, you just have to show up every day and try to just own it and fake it till you get there, and own it. But I do love the humility aspect of it. So we were talking about, trying to decide, like, something that's been important to me since day one, even just back in the blogging days, was being the same person everywhere I go and making sure people know that I am the same person, whether I'm behind the screen or in front of people or talking to somebody at the grocery store. And I think imposter syndrome kind of is grappling with, like, am I who people think I am? And so trying to kind of like match that. And so being your authentic self no matter where you go. And so
do you ever catch yourself straying away from that?
A little. It can be tricky, because I will go to like I said, these networking meetings or these events. Like I spoke at the Kansas City Business Journal Women's Conference. I was like interviewed on stage, but I showed up and I looked around and there were 650 women there, and I knew I was going to be interviewed on stage. And then I was like listening to the other speakers, and I realized there's a lot of women who work in corporate here, and I've never worked in corporate before. And like little old me, I'm texting Soren and I'm like, well, yet another fish out of water. Like, I'm totally out of my depth here. I do not belong. And he's like, you're going to do great. But it was definitely another one of those, like, oh my gosh, I do not belong here. And that happens almost every time I go to any like women in business event. I just never feel like I belong, because I started a business and I have almost never worked in a business. Like, I've worked in a smoothie shop. That does not count. I worked in an office at BYU as a receptionist. Like, also doesn't count in my opinion. So yeah, I never feel like I belong. So I just kind of keep my mouth shut sometimes, but that doesn't feel authentic to me either. So I struggle. I think I do show up as myself, but I sometimes feel like a little kid. Like, and I don't know, I think it makes me likable, but I sometimes don't feel, I'm like, I just kind of own that I'm the junior in the room. Like, I've got a lot to learn. And so that's the humility part. Like, okay, I'm the junior here. You guys got to teach me things.
I think it's always great to be humble enough to learn. One of the podcasts I watch, A-Rod, the professional baseball player, he met with Gary Vee, and he took pen and paper and started taking notes. This is a guy who's made hundreds of $1 million playing baseball, but he still wanted to be a student and learn. Yeah. So I don't think that's a negative.
Yeah. And so I think that's part of probably if you literally don't know things, I think you have to be willing to learn them and own up to the fact that you don't know them. So I think that's probably my next point is like, I'm realizing I am the junior. Like, obviously I own a company, but my company is 5.5 years old. Like, it's a baby company compared to people who've been in business for a long time. So most times I'm going to show up an event and I am going to be the junior little person. Like, I've just not even had a career for very long. And so I'm going to have to learn a lot of things. I know very little. And so if I want to not feel like an imposter, I have to just own where I'm at and who I am. And then people will understand exactly who I am and they won't assume I'm something different. Does that make sense? So no one's going to call me this amazingly genius businesswoman as soon as they understand, oh, she's had some good ideas and her gut and her intuition has gotten her this far. And she's also super humble and willing to learn a lot more. And she asks lots of great questions.
How do you think that comes across internally? Like when you lead a meeting inside of Nickel and Swade?
Yeah.
Because you want to be humble, but you also want people to know that they're following a strong leader.
Yeah, so that's also been really difficult for me. So I'm hoping, we just hired a business coach, kind of like a business mentor. And that's, I think, probably the best thing internally is that my employees are seeing, yes, Kilee has weaknesses, and she's also going to a great source for help with those. So they don't have to be as worried about having a leader who doesn't know as much anymore, because now they have their leader getting help from a really great source. But yeah, I've been struggling with that probably the last 6 months with a leader needs to act like they know things, but what if the leader doesn't know as much as they need to know? So I think that's probably been a really good recent development, is like we've hired a business coach to help us get the help that we need. So there is like a good course forward for everybody. So, and then the other thing that I've done recently is I've asked my accountant to really help me personally shore up on some of the things that I don't know, which is a lot of my way around like our financials. And so I've started business school with BJ, and it's kind of tongue in cheek, but I always feel really, I always feel really scared of a lot of vocabulary around our financials and around our like P&L and our cash flow statements and things like that. Like those words have always just gone right over my head every time I go to networking meetings and people ask questions, and every time we go to the bank. And so I decided I don't want to feel dumb about these things anymore. I know people internally, like my accountant, like Soren, who understand these things, and they could easily teach them to me. And so I've been spending about an hour or two a week with them going over just the basics, because it's not like I need to learn how to build a sheet, but I just need to learn my way around them. And so I think that's another way to overcome imposter syndrome, is to literally learn the things that you don't know, because it's not very far between not knowing something and knowing something, so that you feel like, hey, I'm no longer faking it. I actually know something more. And that confidence grows. And we all know I'm all about learning new things, trying new things, and that instantly builds confidence. So you're no longer feeling like I'm going to be found out. And you don't have to fake, knowing things at the bank anymore, because heaven knows we all do that, whether we own a business or not. So yeah, so I think I am for me, overcoming the imposter syndrome is being super honest about what I do know and I don't know, but also knowing where my worth comes from, and that the value I really bring to my business, I do bring value to my business. It's just not in building spreadsheets, and it's not in having come from business school. And that I have really great people who can help me with those things. If you've been successful, you've been successful for a reason. And that if you have weaknesses that you're worried about people finding out about, be open about them and then do something to get better at those things. And you will feel better inside, because every time we strengthen a weakness, we feel stronger. And then that humility that comes from being open about weaknesses, I think everybody always admires. So I think you'll always win friends and win the trust of others when we're open about our weaknesses. So I think that's kind of my path forward with the imposter syndrome, and where I'm at with kind of struggling and trying to overcome with that this year. So I don't think the imposter syndrome is only for like business and for CEOs or for like business owners, because I've also experienced it with parenting and marriage, because like I posted something the other day where Soren had written me sticky notes that said love you, which were super supportive and also super out of character for him, which I'm not throwing him under the bus. It was super nice of him, and I super needed it, because I had been having such imposter syndrome like flare up. I was feeling like the biggest like piece of garbage, and like the world is falling apart, and we're on the sinking ship of a business that like everything's falling apart. And so I really needed a boost, and he thought to do some sticky notes for me, and I shared it because I wanted to share that it really boosted me and helped my morning. And I think that it was a great idea, and I loved him for it, but it doesn't ever happen. And I, like people were commenting and saying, marriage goals, you guys are the cutest. I love it. Like, you guys are just amazing, power couple, blah, blah, blah. But it kind of made me feel like, oh my gosh, like, yes, we are a great couple. Yes, like, I love that he did that for me. And I do think this is what like marriage looks like. Marriage looks like you never do that for your spouse except for like the one day when they really need it. And that is goals. But what it might have come across as for my followers is that Soren does that like, every other week, plus breakfast in bed and flowers on a Wednesday. And like that we go on date nights every Friday, because we try to do date nights. But guess what? I schedule those date nights, and they typically involve doing whatever I want to do. And it's not like the glamorous like date night feelings of romance. Like it's not what #marriage goals might seem to be. So I can have these feelings of like, oh my gosh, imposter syndrome. Like, people think our marriage is this, but it's really this. And so anyways, my point is that it can happen with marriage. It can also happen with parenting, where people are like, you're the best mom ever. And then I go home and my kids are dumping Cheerios on the floor. And then I get in my shower and I'm like, what is on the ceiling? Oh crap. I gave Rush chocolate chips in the shower, and I let him stay in there, and he like threw them on the ceiling and they melted. And oh gosh, like, anyways, we use the shower as a babysitter sometimes, but like that's kind of how I parent sometimes. And my kids are awesome, and they're happy and they're healthy, but like anyway, what I'm saying is like people could think that I parent in such an amazing way, and then I could go home and be like, oh my gosh, I'm the worst parent ever. And I think a lot of people deal with that, where it looks one way on the outside, and then we go home and inside we tell ourselves, no, I suck, I'm the worst. And if people saw how I really parent, they would think I'm the worst. Like, I can't tell anybody that this is how I really am. So my goal as an influencer, or as somebody who has a platform, is I really do try to show like the good and the bad. But I think just some of these same things still apply, like being honest, being humble, being open, always trying to do better. Like we all have places where we can struggle with this.
Sorry, I was holding that in.
It's okay. Because I didn't know where I was going with this. We all have places that we can struggle with this, and that we can, be cautious and be wise about, like, it's possible that we could be susceptible to this, where we can have this inner dialogue of, people think I'm this way, but I'm really this way, and I sure don't want anybody to find out. So it's not just in work, it's not just in business. It definitely could be in parenting, in marriage, in all kinds of places. Okay, so one other thing is that I think imposter syndrome, one of the biggest hangups with it is that you are really afraid of failing and being found out about failing. And that is, like, I think, terrible in so many ways. Like, failing is one of the best ways to learn and to move forward and to grow. And so whether it's in business, whether it's with parenting, whether it's with marriage, like, we have to fail. We have to be willing to make mistakes, move forward, be willing to just fail forward, fail in front of people, fail with people, and then learn from those mistakes. And so I think that mindset is also incredibly helpful, to be willing to fail and then be open about it, talk about it. And then I think then you'll be able to have some success. And then the last thing I would say is, then when you do start, like, having success, like, own it and be happy about it, and be open about that too. Have that support system that you can be excited about your success and be proud of it, and don't just, like, shove it under the rug and say, no, it's not a big deal. Like, if you have an awesome video, Derek, like, share it, tell your friends about it, ask them to share it. Like, if you're proud of something, share it. And I think
family that we still talk about
that
to this day.
Hiding things we're proud of, like, also kind of, like, feeds that imposter syndrome of being like, I'm not good enough and I'll never be good enough. So I think that's also really important. So be willing to fail, but then when we're successful, like, own it and be really proud of it. Thanks for listening today. That wraps up today's episode. Would love for you to screenshot this episode and tell us what your best takeaway was, and then share. And I will reshare some of my favorites. And would love for you to review, rate, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we will see you next week. Thanks for listening today to With Kilee Nichols. Stay tuned next week for another episode. And if you can't wait until then, you can find me at onelittlemama.com, MOMMA, for beauty, our family, style tips, and more. And you can find my business at nicholandswade.com with the and spelled out. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.